Welcome back to The Bear! Now, this is a cute story. My brother, who was addicted to painkillers, blew his head off on the State Street Bridge! Bam! Okay, chefs, The Bear Season 3. So, going into 2024, The Bear Season 3 was one of my top 2 most anticipated pieces of media of the year. Doom Part 2 was obviously number 1, and then The Bear was a close second. And so, when it comes to The Bear Season 3, overall, I think it's the weakest season, but I also have to preface the fact that just because I think it's the weakest season doesn't mean I think that it's bad. Honestly, I just don't think it's as strong as the other 2 seasons, and also there's something very joyless about this season, but in the sense of there is no amusement or enjoyment, and I think thematically that works considering how at the end of season 2, when Kami freaks out in the freezer, he's all like,
I don't need to provide amusement or enjoyment. I don't need to receive any amusement or enjoyment.
So thematically, it makes sense that Season 3 is probably the bleakest yet. And for the most part, Season 3 just feels a bit more less than Seasons 1 and Season 2. Like, Season 1 and Seasons 2 are very standalone in the sense of they tell a complete-ish story. Like, obviously, they leave things open at the end for more seasons, but still, the overall narrative of a season is there. Season 3, in many ways, to me, just feels like a Part 1. I think the best way I can compare it to something is with Mission Impossible 7, where Mission Impossible 7 is good, but also a lot of it just feels like setup, and you get to the end, you go, okay, the story's not over, there's more to tell, but also the film itself isn't entirely complete. The thing is too is that there's so much to gush about with Season 3. I like a lot of the stuff done with a bunch of the characters. There's a lot of nice paralleling and thematic stuff. There are some really good episodes. The first 3 episodes are really strong. I remember watching them and then I tweeted out saying that I saw the first 3 episodes and I think that The Bear Season 3 might be the best season, but then I watched the rest of the episodes and it kind of felt like it was meandering till it got to the end. If you were to ask me what was the weakest part of the season, I would say the scripts themselves, because overall the story ideas are good. I have no qualms or issues with the acting. I mean, Jeremy Allen White, Ayo Edebiri, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, the rest of the cast, the rest of the main cast, they all deliver as they always do. It's just that I think overall it is just the scripting. It's not as clean as the first 2 seasons. I do think you can pinpoint a lot of the issues down to the script, because I remember they shot the show during the actors and writers strike. Jeremy Allen White a couple of weeks ago said that they only wrapped a couple of weeks before the premiere.
We just wrapped 2 weeks ago, which is kind of insane.
And so, in many ways, you can just go, oh yeah, they were trying to play catch up to the actors and writers strike because they missed so much time. And a lot of the weaknesses with the season can be pinpointed straight down to the scripts. Also, cinematographically, there's something about Season 3 that feels off. It feels a lot more colder, less inviting than the previous seasons. And maybe it is feeding into the idea of that this season is not meant to provide amusement or enjoyment. But at the same time too, it is The Bear. Like, no matter how dark The Bear got, it had incredibly hilarious moments. Aside from 1 or 2 moments in the season, I can't really pinpoint any iconic moments. Like, compared to Season 1 and Season 2, those seasons are filled with so many iconic moments. Moments like Richie and Kami arguing when they fight over the hot dog at the kids' party, or they drug all the kids with Xanax. You need to go to the hardware store. You're gonna get some joint compound. You're gonna get some cock. There's no one-take episode. There's no freezer moment. There's no Kami 7-minute monologue. It is just kind of like, yep, we're going through the motions till we get to the end where we find out that The Bear got bad reviews. Like, I'm not saying there aren't any funny moments this season. There's a moment, I think it's in episode 2, between Kami, Claire, and Cicero. It's so funny with Cicero walks in going, why are we spending money on super soakers? And then Kami's just like, Richie, idiot, Richie. Richie, idiot, Richie. Amazing. It's so funny. That episode has a lot of the charm of the first 2 seasons, but then after episode 3, the show kind of like meanders along. You get the great episode, I think it's 8, that's directed by Ayo Edebiri. That's a great episode. It's a really good episode exploring Tina's backstory. There's a lot of great moments between Tina and her husband and Mikey, and in many ways, it's a great analysis and commentary on the current state of the job market. And Ayo Edebiri shows real talent behind the camera. It was really well directed. It's just that after episode 3, there aren't really many great moments. The season kind of all like blends together. Aside from the episode where it's Donna and Claire in the hospital as Claire gives birth, like, yeah, that's a good episode because it really brings together Donna and Claire. They share a bond, and in many ways it's them working through their trauma and reconciling. It's a good episode, but The first 3 episodes are so good. Like, episode 1 was so meditative. The way it was shot, edited, directed, it felt so dreamy. Though an issue I do have cinematographically with the whole season is the fact that it's not very flattering compared to the first 2 seasons where everyone looks really, you know, they look good. There's something about this season where I don't know if they shot it on different cameras or with different lenses, but everyone looks a bit older. You can see a lot more of the fine lines. It doesn't look as pretty as the first 2 seasons. But the overall vibe of episode 1 is just so dreamy and meditative. We see Kami's training, and you kind of realize that Kami, aside from that one chef in New York who broke him completely, he had a really lovely time training to be a chef. Kami is only as messed up as he is because of that one New York chef. I've forgotten his name, and he comes back in the finale, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, we see glimpses of the rise and fall of Mikey as he descends into drug abuse. And then we also see that Kami technically was at the funeral. He just didn't go in and see the service, which I thought was a really nice and interesting detail. Another interesting detail was the fact that Kami makes this blood orange dish and it gets served, and we find out that it gets served to a younger Sydney. And in many ways, it's kind of like soulmateism of Sid Kami. If you're a fan of The Bear and you're on Twitter, you know all about the Sid Kami fan base and how everyone like believes Sydney and Kami like destined to be together and such. In many ways, the show does do that. It kind of does code the fact that Kami and Sydney are a very good pair, but then also this season kind of like deconstructs the reasons as to why they won't work. That mainly being Kami is not listening to Sydney at all. He kind of like descends into his own kind of world and shell because he's trying not to let, you know, what happened in the freezer happen again. He's overcompensating. He's now changing the menu. He's not consulting Sydney. He's gone full on like, no, I'm going to control everything. And it ultimately leads to the downfall of the Bear restaurant. And then we get to episode 2 and we get all the classic isms of the Bear. Like, it just feels like the first 2 seasons just, you know, elevated. We get the yelling, we get the comedy, we get the Sid and Kami stuff, we get the Richie and Kami stuff. It's all really good stuff.
Is it fucking rich? Is it fucking rich, Richard?
Every time Richie and Kami were in the kitchen and they were just arguing, it was funny. Like, but they're just like, fuck you, fuck you.
Fuck you, there,
Oh,
alright?
no,
How
there,
about that?
fuck you.
There,
No, there,
fuck you.
Fuck you, there.
It's so good. I love too when Richie's just like, oh, you're accusing me of saying all these terrible things, like what, I love you? It's good. That whole sequence is so good, and just, it was kind of annoying that we didn't get any closer to Kami and Richie reconciling by the end of the season, but then you know that they are going to reconcile because it's that stage where like they love each other but they've hurt each other, but you know they're going to reconcile eventually. Like, they still love each other. And then Cicero too, just the whole episode was comedic. When Cicero walks in and Kami's just like, what are you doing here? And the Cicero's just like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? I own the fucking place. And then the bit too where Cicero's just like, Nunya, and Kami's like, what's Nunya? And he's just like, oh yeah, none of your business. It's so good. That episode was so funny. The tension between Richie and Kami was so good. Even when Richie brings up Claire, you're like, low blow. But even Richie acknowledges that and apologizes for it. The conflict in the episode was so good. I really genuinely just wish the rest of the season kept up this momentum. The stuff between Kami and Marcus too, and Marcus is just like, look, my mum died, I just want to work, I just want to sink into my work, and I want you to take us there, Bear. I want you to get us that star. It's so good. I really just wish this episode was like the momentum the rest of the season had. Like, episode 3 too is also really great. That whole month of service at the Bear, and you see the conflict between Richie and Kami, how Richie is just not listening to anyone. He's not listening to anyone. He's constantly changing the menu, and the thing is too that is kind of out of character is the way Cicero allow him to constantly change the menu and waste materials. It's like, why aren't you putting a stop to this? You guys are in charge of the money. I also do like too how in many ways Sydney is kind of too good for the Bear, in the sense of she's a really great mediator, she's a really great sous chef, she's also a really great, you know, co-owner of the Bear, and she's very good at like reading the room. There's that moment where Kami is on Expo and Tina can't get the dish right, and he's about to fully lose it on Tina, but then Sydney sees and goes, oh, okay, no, I'm gonna go help Tina. That was a really great moment. You can really see the chemistry of the characters in the kitchen. It was so good. There's also the moment too where Kami is on Expo and he's just losing it. He's just like, faster, faster, you guys need to go faster, you're too fucking slow. There was a line reading there where Jeremy Allen White really reminded me of Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka, and I won't lie, still kind of want him to play Willy Wonka at some point. Like, that's too good of an opportunity to miss. Like, Jeremy Allen White literally looks like Gene Wilder. Like, anyways, I digress. Although I say that after episode 3, the rest of the season kind of meanders towards the end, there are a lot of great moments in the season. We see Kami's toxicity feed onto Sydney, and by the end of the season, Sydney has a full-on panic attack that parallels Kami's panic attack in season 1? Season 2? Not to mention the fact the scene where Kami confronts his New York chef, I've forgotten the guy's name, but when he confronts him and he's like trauma dumping on him, and the chef's just like, yeah, and I made you better. That was so, you know, heartbreaking, but it was also so realistic too, because what the guy was saying, like, made sense, but also at the same time too, it's like, no, that's abusive. That's not how you do it. There's a way of doing that without being super cruel and abusive. Like, the stuff that Chef did to Kami is very similar to actor training, where, like, in acting, you get told all the time that you're not good, you suck, do it again. Well, but then it depends on the teacher. If the teacher's very good, they will, like, be very supportive and they'll tell you, no, do it again, but do it like this. They'll be constructive about it. When you act, you are constantly doing things over and over again till you get it right, and eventually it just becomes ingrained in your body to where you know when you've done something good and when you've done something bad. And in many ways, that's what that chef was doing to Kami. He was teaching him to be a better chef. That whole conversation they had was really good, though that final episode was just... It's a bit weird story-wise. It's like Chef Terry just decided to shut down her restaurant, and then we had like a reunion of all like the guys from Forks, like Richie and Chef Jess expand their chemistry a bit more, and then Garrett's there, and he's like, that's my boy, and it's kind of like, yeah, I remember Forks. It does feel a bit heavy-handed of them just going, yep, remember Forks? Like, yeah, I know, it's still the best episode of the show. Also, one of the chefs that works for Chef Terry goes up to Sydney and asks if she wants to partner with him. And in many ways, Sydney should probably partner off with him because Kami is kind of like self-destructing and stuff. But also at the same time, it's like, she's kind of like, not indebted to Kami, but like she is like kind of like linked with Kami. Kami has given her a lot, but then for her own sanity and her own mental health, she probably should leave Kami. What I will say though is that easily the weakest point of the entire season is the facts. The facts are funny in very small doses. Like in the previous seasons, they're there in like small doses, but I feel like this season they're in it way too much, and they really over-rely. Like the writers think the facts are like the funniest characters, but they're kind of not. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the celebrity cameos, like John Cena as one of the facts, that was kind of great. And Josh Hartnett as Frank, I love that interaction with him and Richie. That was good too. It was a really good scene because it was Richie trying to find reasons to hate Frank, but he couldn't because Frank was kind of a cool guy. Also, I do think a lot of the stuff with Claire and Kami was kind of wasted potential. It's like, yep, we're just gonna like pat around that until we get to season 4 where we eventually conclude everything, and it's like, but why? Just resolve some of this stuff now. Like, if Kami can leave a half-assed voicemail to Richie on his phone, why can't he do the same for Claire? I'm gonna stand by this when I say that I think the best season 3 is the weakest season, and in many ways it feels like part 1 of the story. And I can't really rate it, I'd say, until I see the second part of the story. As a standalone piece, it's the weakest season, but also I feel like it will have very strong payoff in season 4. Because there was an article or a rumor going about saying that they wanted to shoot season 3, season 4 back to back, but they couldn't. They only shot elements of season 4 when they shot season 3 or something. So in many ways, you can kind of gauge that season 3 and season 4 are meant to be a part 1 and a part 2. And I do just want to see where they go with the rest of the show. Like, that's the thing. I don't think season 3 is bad, but also it's not as good as the previous 2 seasons, but at the same time too, it's still very good television. It's not as fun as the previous 2 seasons, but overall, narratively, it works well enough. It's just not as good as the first 2 seasons. The first 2 seasons are so good, and season 3, it has a lot of great moments in it. Those first 3 episodes are really strong. It's just that it kind of all just blends together by the end until you get to that finale, and then the finale is like, oh yeah, we're just like chilling at Chef Terry's and we get some nice conversations and stuff, and then we leave on the cliffhanger of, oh, the bear got bad reviews, and it's like, okay, where do we go now? We still haven't resolved Richie and Kami, we still haven't resolved Claire and Kami, like, what are we doing here? It's not like there isn't character stuff going on. I've seen people on Twitter call this season filler. It's not filler, it's all character building. Like, I say it all blends together, but then also too, a lot of the scenes, aside from the scenes with the facts, it's all character building stuff. It's just that structurally this season is not nearly as strong as season 1 and season 2. But chefs, those are my thoughts on the best season 3. What did you guys think about it? Do you agree with me thinking that although it's the weakest season, it's still pretty good television? Or do you still feel like this season was a bit of a letdown? Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe, follow on social media, all that good stuff. Until we meet again, see you guys next time.